So, before I took my super long hiatus, I made a video talking about Freddy in Dead by Daylight and why I thought he was boring, uninspired, dull, something like that. The video was basically about why I thought Freddy was a really disappointing killer in terms of his presentation and creativity despite being a horror icon. Somewhat poetically, around the time I was planning on making videos again, it was announced that Freddy was getting a rework and I was really excited for it. A month or so later, we finally got that rework and I have thoughts. I think a lot of people, myself included, had a lot of expectations for what a Freddy rework would entail. I personally was expecting, or I guess hoping, for a complete overhaul of his power. I was holding out for the idea that Behavior would take a look at his OG design and rework that version of him instead of just doubling down on modern Freddy. I think OG Freddy, despite his weakness and glaring design flaws, was a really interesting concept for a killer. So did Behavior do that? Did they give Freddy a fresh coat of paint? I mean, kind of. I won't lie to you guys, I do wish we had gotten something more akin to how Freddy was when he was released, but, I mean, beggars can't be choosers. Old Freddy had a lot of issues, and I imagine that it was much easier for Behavior to just focus on his current state and make a rework more centered on buffing his modern design instead of trying to make the old one work. Even though it's not what I personally would have done, I can still appreciate it for what it is. It's a rework of modern Freddy, not a reimagining of the old one. Even though it's not exactly what I wanted, I'm just happy he got any attention at all. So that being said, do I like the rework? I didn't at first, but then it started to grow on me a little. Here's the thing, I don't think Freddy's rework makes him much stronger, at least in regards to his chase potential. He essentially still plays the way he did before the rework, which is just bargain bin clown. His hinder has been nerfed to compensate for how much easier his snares are to use in chase because, I imagine having a killer with better anti-loop than most killers in addition to everything else he has would just make him too good. At the end of the day, you'll still be on a pallet-only diet when playing Freddy, which isn't necessarily a bad thing. Only a few killers are good because they negate loops entirely, while some are good because of how quickly they get rid of pallets. Freddy's anti-loop, being pretty decent, still forces survivors to use pallets, which causes them to run out of resources quicker than I run out of patience every time I go on Twitter. This is where I made my first mistake when assessing how good he is after the rework. You see, my problem was that I wasn't focused enough on the big picture. Most of the time, I play killers who can deal with pallets really well, other than my unhealthy amount of hours on Trapper. For example, my two favorite killers are Vecna and Nemesis, two killers who can basically ignore pallets if you're good enough with them. It was with this experience that led me to believe Freddy wasn't good. My monkey brain feels that pallet sun and thinks I lost a potential hit even if it was impossible to get due to how Freddy plays. Thanks to Freddy's new snares, it's actually really easy to get rid of a lot of pallets quickly, which then becomes less resources for the next guy I chase. I was trying to play him too much like Clown, who can basically contest every loop with his bottles and hard movement speed diff. Freddy doesn't really play like that. He has anti-loop, but anti-loop that's more focused on deleting pallets, not getting hits. Once I accepted that fact, I started to see how great the snares can be. They now feel like a mix between Clown's bottles and Dr. Shock, going through walls that hit survivors. As I mentioned, they don't hinder as much as they used to, but that's something I can understand. Despite that, the snares are just as good as they used to be for preventing fast faults, and maybe even more so now given how easy they are to throw out and chase. You'll still get wrecked at most decent pallets, but you can easily force them down much quicker than most killers. The snares, while being side graded a bit, are without a doubt much more fun to use. Maybe there's something to be said about Freddy losing the small amount of trap killer he used to have in his DNA, but it doesn't bother me too much. The snares being much more fluid and dynamic is a great change, and I'm happy to see them requiring a bit more muscle memory to use because, there's nothing better in DBD than skill expression. In addition, the snares aren't the only thing that Freddy has at his disposal now. Dream pallets have also been buffed and are now base kit for Freddy. Dream pallets used to be pretty useless. The idea was that you trick survivors into running to dead zones and get a hit because of it. Sometimes it would work, but you do so much better by just running dream snares. The fact that you had to use an add-on to get dream pallets and they replaced snares entirely made them more of a detriment than anything else. Now you can switch between dream snares and dream pallets with the click of a button. Awesome. Dream pallets can still trick survivors into dead zones, but now become highlighted to the survivor when they get close enough. By pressing a button when using pallet focus, you can rupture the dream pallet and damage any survivors within a certain radius. I'll be honest, on the PTB I thought this was pretty useless, but thanks to some buffs I've certainly warmed up to them, despite how situational they tend to be. On some maps, using rupture can basically force survivors to get hit, especially on specific maps because the rupture goes through floors. Even though using rupture is pretty obvious to the survivors and there's a decent build up to the pallet exploding, I was still surprised by how often I was getting hits with them. That'll probably change once everyone gets used to the rework, but I mean, we'll have to wait and see. As for right now, I'm shocked by how useful they can be, sometimes resulting in an instant down if the survivor isn't paying enough attention. It's worth mentioning that you can be stunned by the dream pallets, your pallets, which is, I mean, it's kind of stupid, but I also find it pretty funny, so I won't complain about it. As I mentioned before, Freddy's chase potential isn't insane. You'll still be eating pallets for breakfast and get looped like most killers. Throw on your rapid brutality, brutal strength, enduring, or save the best for last, like a large chunk of M1 killers, as he can be pretty frustrating to play at some loops, and especially at most main buildings. Even though he's a bit better at chasing, it's not enough to make him super scary in regards to how quick he can down you. Instead, I found that his strength comes from his genuinely terrifying map control. Alright gamers, let's talk about the new dream projection. I mean, new. It was always there, it's just better now. Freddy's new teleport, or dream projection, which can be activated anytime an asleep survivor heals or gets healed, is insanely good. Now, before you say it, yes, it can be easily countered by survivors just waking up, either by using one of the clocks around the map, failing a skill check, or survivors who are awake waking up the ones who aren't. That being said, the teleport is amazing against people who don't know about it, but is really easy to counter if you do. So why do I think it's insanely good? I think it's insanely good because it's one of the best deterrents in the game for survivors grouping up and healing. He can instantly cross the map and reach anyone if an asleep survivor even touches one who isn't, making survivors panic to wake up if they even want to heal, which can do wonderful things for game delay. This combines with perks like Sloppy Butcher and Leverage really well, because the longer survivors heal, the more likely they are to fall asleep. In addition, his teleport to generators has also been buffed, allowing him to teleport quicker and to generators that are blocked or completed, giving him more map control than he's ever had, and thank God you can see the aura of the projection so I don't feel lost every time I teleport somewhere. With all that said, I think Freddy is a better killer than he was before. I hesitate to say he's super strong, but I can't deny that he's much more effective at controlling the map and focusing on the overall match. His chase power, while not overwhelmingly oppressive, is still effective at forcing pallets down to make the map more dangerous for the survivors. I'm personally kind of happy they didn't just make him a strong chase killer like they did with Singularity's buff, because I feel like we have enough of those now. With every new killer being really strong in chase, like Houndmaster or Dracula, the game can feel a little samey and bland depending on what killers you consistently go against. Freddy being more focused on macro gameplay was a solid choice, and while he's not perfect, I'm glad I was able to appreciate the nuance in the rework. That being said, I still feel like you really benefit from some changes. For example, I think the immunity from clocks is really unfun to go against, knowing you can't put survivors to sleep with your snares, basically forcing you to just hold W at loops, which is never going to be fun. The dream pallets could also use some more love, especially with how they can sometimes feel pointless and only really become effective in super specific circumstances. However, I'm still happy with the rework. We may never see old Freddy again, but at least he's a killer who can hold his own now. Freddy version 3.0 was, as I would say, a success. I can't wait for version 4.0 to come out next time the game's meta changes and he becomes useless. That's it for me, gamers, at least for now. Have a wonderful day.
This is crazy B-roll right here.
$300.
Oh my!